Let's rewind for a second. You went to college because that's what smart, responsible people do. You picked a major, maybe because you loved it, maybe because your parents said, just do something practical. You showed up, you worked, you pulled all-nighters during finals, missed parties to finish group projects, and you smiled politely during every unpaid internship orientation where they promised you exposure. And you were told, just get the degree and everything else will fall into place. And then you graduated. Cue the applause, the cap toss, the generic, you did it cards from relatives who still don't know what your major was. But now what? You're home and you refreshed Indeed 27 times today. Your inbox is a graveyard of, we've decided to move forward with other candidates emails. The only job that got back to you wants 3 years of experience for an entry-level role and pays less than what you made when you were lifeguarding back at age 16. Meanwhile, your friend who skipped college entirely is making 6 figures selling shipping containers on TikTok. How is this real life? But here's the thing. It's not your fault. You didn't mess up. You played by the rules, but no one told you the rules were from a game that doesn't exist anymore. Because the world you were preparing for, the one with clear paths, stable careers, and handshake deals, is not the world we live in anymore. This is a world where AI can write better emails than your marketing degree taught you to. Entry level now means entry level, but with a master's degree and 5 internships. And everyone on LinkedIn seems to be thrilled to announce their new job that they don't even like. So yeah, it's confusing. You were told, go to school, work hard, get the degree. But no one told you what to do after the degree. And now you're trying to figure it all out while juggling resume edits, vague advice from your aunt who used to do something with HR, and your own voice in your head going, wait, this is it? Here's what nobody says out loud. You're not behind, the system is just outdated, and you're not the only one realizing it. That's why so many recent grads are looking around and thinking, maybe I need to go back to school. Not because they failed, because they want direction, structure, and leverage. A real path that leads somewhere better. And right now, for a lot of people, that path is pointing toward law school. But before you follow it, you need to know how the game actually works. And here's the plot twist no one saw coming. Law school isn't just an escape from chaos. It's a high-stakes, high-cost, career-defining decision. It can open doors that most jobs can't touch. But only if you enter the game with your eyes wide open and a plan to win. And that starts with understanding the real reason so many law school applicants fail to turn their degrees into careers. And to be honest, law school probably wasn't always part of your plan. But now it's starting to make sense. And every time you hear about somebody getting a big scholarship or a big law offer, a small voice in your head goes, should I be doing that? You're not imagining the trend. Law school applications are spiking fast. Some schools are seeing 30%, even 40% jumps in a single year. At first glance, it looks like a legal renaissance. Interest is back and the field seems to be booming. But if you zoom out, you're going to see a different story. What's really happening is a stacked wave of deferred decisions. During the pandemic, thousands of people delayed law school because of finances, burnout, or just not knowing what the world was going to look like. And now they're all coming back at once. Add in a broken job market, and law school starts to look like the one path that still has a map. You have 3 years of structure, a degree people understand, and a profession with prestige. In a world where nobody knows what's happening next quarter, law school offers a long-term plan. And to be clear, of course that is valuable. Structure matters and direction matters. But you still have to ask the real question. Is law school a good investment or just a temporary escape? Because if you're spending 3 years and 6 figures on a degree, you don't just want a title, you want options. And that only happens when you stop thinking of law school as the destination and start treating it like a strategic entry point into the legal world. And like any smart investment, your return depends entirely on how you enter the game. Law school is not a guarantee. It's a bet, and a big one. It's a bet that you will get admitted to a school that will open doors. You'll get through 3 intense years without burning out or dropping out. You'll pass the bar on your first try, or maybe your second, and you'll land a job that justifies the time, the money, and the mental bandwidth you poured into it. And this isn't just a time commitment, it's a financial one. Most students graduate with $150,000 to $200,000 in student debt, depending on where they go and how much they borrow. And that's just the principal. We're not even talking about the interest. And meanwhile, life doesn't hit pause. You still got to pay rent, get groceries, and you might be supporting family or trying to build a future outside of work. So yeah, this is a bet. But here's the thing most people forget. It's not just a bet on law school, it's a bet on yourself. That's why how you enter matters, where you go matters, and how much debt you take on matters. The difference between attending a top school on scholarship versus a bottom tier school at full price isn't just prestige. It's whether your degree becomes a launch pad or a liability. And if that sounds intense, good. Because the people who win at this game are the ones who treat it like a game worth playing well. They don't just apply and hope. They enter with leverage. And that leverage, more than anything else, starts with one number, your LSAT score. Because a JD doesn't guarantee a six-figure job, or any job for that matter. You don't magically graduate into a corner office with your name on the door. You graduate into a job market where employers are still asking, what can you do for me? And here's the reality most law schools won't advertise in the brochure. Big law jobs are hyper-competitive, with fewer openings and tighter recruiting funnels. Public interest in government might have a good mission, but have terrible salaries, often $50,000 to $60,000 a year with no loan forgiveness for years. And mid-sized firms are regional, they're hit or miss, and many don't hire straight out of law school. And JD Advantage roles often require networking, not just credentials. And of course, there are amazing jobs out there, but the pipeline isn't automatic. According to ABA data, about 1 in 5 law school grads are either unemployed, underemployed, or not even practicing law at all 10 months after graduation. And the worst part is, they all had loans. This, of course, is not meant to scare you away from law school, but it's to kill the illusion that the degree will do the heavy lifting for you. You've got to do the heavy lifting for yourself. And that's why the way you enter law school matters so much. Where you go dictates the quality of your network, your on-campus interview options, your clerkship access, and your bar passage support. And that is not determined by luck. It's determined mostly by your LSAT score. Get a higher LSAT, get into a better school, have a better job pipeline, and a better shot at making this whole thing worth it. That's why I keep saying the LSAT is not a hoop, it's a lever. And it's not just about admissions. It's about creating the conditions for a legal career that actually works for your bank account, your goals, and your sanity. Now let's talk about something that doesn't show up on the LSAT, but could quietly wreck your future if you ignore it. Your debt to income ratio. This is the part where a lot of smart people, and I'm talking people who read contracts for fun and can quote the model rules of professional conduct, completely drop the ball. Here's how it happens. You get into law school, you take out loans, you think, I'll figure it out after I graduate. But what you don't realize is that you're borrowing tens of thousands of dollars, possibly $100,000 to $200,000 with interest, and the interest starts accruing while you're still in class. Let's say you take out $200,000 at 7% interest. By the time you graduate and pass the bar, that loan might have ballooned $230,000. Then you start your first job. Let's say you're making $75,000 at a firm or $58,000 in government. Do the math. That's not I can finally breathe money. That's I live with roommates and hope my car doesn't break down kind of money. You're not a lawyer with options, you're a hostage to debt. And what makes it worse? You can't discharge law school loans in bankruptcy. They stick. Through job loss, medical issues, recessions, they don't care. Now contrast that with someone who scores higher on the LSAT, gets into a top program, and gets $100,000 in scholarships. That's not just less debt, that's freedom. That's the difference between spending your 20s and 30s digging out of a hole versus using those years to build wealth, take risks, and create the life you imagined when you decided to become a lawyer. And again, the key variable here is not your GPA, not your resume, it's your LSAT score. That's what unlocks merit-based scholarships. That's what gives you leverage with admissions officers. And that's what can literally cut 6 figures off your total cost. So yes, law school can absolutely be worth it, but only if you walk in with your eyes open and your numbers working for you, not against you. Now, let's flip the perspective for a second. You're stressed about getting in, stressed about the LSAT, stressed about whether this is even the right move. But here's what no one tells you. Law schools are stressed too. They've got their own problems to solve. And you, yes you, might be part of the solution. Here's what's happening on their side. University budgets are being slashed. The rankings are more volatile than crypto. The ABA is tightening rules on job placement and bar passage rates. Donors and employers are watching closely. And applications are rising, which means more noise and more risk. They're not just trying to fill seats. They're trying to admit students who will stay enrolled all 3 years, pass the bar on the first try, land solid jobs, and make the school look good in the US News rankings. Why? Because if students drop out, fail the bar, or can't get hired, it reflects directly on the school, and schools get punished for it. Funding goes down, reputation takes a hit, and career services starts sweating. So what do admission officers want more than anything? Certainty. They want to admit students they can trust to deliver outcomes, students who will not become liabilities, students who won't tank their metrics. And here's the catch. They can't tell that from your essays. They can't tell that from your resume either, but they can tell it from your LSAT score. That's why your score matters more than people think. It's not just one part of a holistic review. It's the single strongest predictor they have for whether you'll succeed in law school and beyond. A higher LSAT score says, I'm not a risk, I'm a win. You're not just another applicant. You are a solution to their problem. And that flips the entire dynamic of admissions. You're not just hoping they'll pick you, you're showing them why they can't afford not to. You've probably heard the phrase, we use a holistic review process. Let me translate that for you. We still care a lot about the LSAT, but we want to sound nice about it. And look, law schools do consider your personal statement, your GPA, your resume, and letters of rec. Those things all matter. But none of them does what the LSAT does. None of them give admissions a clean, apples-to-apples metric they can compare across every single applicant. GPAs vary wildly between schools, majors, professors, and of course, grade inflation plays a role. Essays are sometimes brilliant, sometimes ghostwritten, sometimes written by ChatGPT. Work experience is hard to quantify, and recommendations are often generic or heavily biased. But the LSAT? It's standard, it's objective, it's regulated, timed, scored, and validated with data. It gives law schools the one thing they need most, a signal they can trust. And that is especially important in a competitive cycle when they're choosing between hundreds or thousands of qualified applicants who all seem pretty good. So a 170 plus LSAT score doesn't just say, I'm smart. It says, I can handle dense technical material. I know how to manage time under pressure. And I've built the exact reasoning muscles law school requires. In other words, it says, I'm ready. And of course, let's not forget the rankings. Law schools are obsessed with rankings. And one of the key metrics in the rankings is the median LSAT score of the school. The higher your score, the more it helps them boost their numbers. So no matter how much they talk about being holistic, make no mistake about it, if you walk in with a higher LSAT score, you are not just an applicant, you are a stat booster for them. That makes you more attractive. It gives you leverage, and that opens doors other applicants never even see. Now let's clear something up. The LSAT is not a trivia test. It doesn't care if you memorized Latin legal terms. It doesn't reward you for how many books you've read. And it definitely doesn't care what school you went to for undergrad. The LSAT is not about what you know, it's about how you think. The LSAT tests the core skill set that separates average lawyers from great ones. Reasoning under pressure. And here's what that actually looks like. Can you spot a flaw in someone's argument even when it sounds polished? Can you hold two opposing ideas in your head without panicking? Can you connect abstract principles to real-world situations quickly? Can you read something dense, boring, and technical and still understand it the first time? That's the job. If you're in a courtroom, a negotiation, a deposition, no one's going to give you 90 minutes to figure it out. You've got to think on your feet. You've got to stay calm while everybody else around you is trying to spin the facts. The LSAT is training for that. It doesn't just predict whether you'll do well on law school exams, it predicts whether you'll be able to survive the reading load, navigate complex reasoning on demand, and think clearly when everything is moving fast. And that's exactly why law schools take it so seriously. Because you can fake a lot of things on your application, but you can't fake your way to 170 plus. You either built the skills or you didn't. And if you did, that score sends a signal that cuts through every resume, every essay, every why our school paragraph. It says, I think like a lawyer already. Now let's talk about time, because this is where most people get it wrong. If you're sitting at a 152 right now, you might think, I'll just study for a few weeks and see how it goes. But that's the kind of thinking that leads straight to a $250,000 mistake. Because let's be honest, getting to a 170 plus is not something you just wing. It's not like finals week where you chug coffee, pull 3 all-nighters, and hope for a B+. This is a skills-based test, and real skill takes time to build. Here's what I've seen over and over with students who actually break through. 1 month of prep gets you familiar with the test. 3 months builds momentum and consistency, but 6 months gives you real command over question types and pacing. Now, of course, that doesn't mean you have to take 6 months. Some students do it faster, and there are more efficient ways to study than the standard ones. But if you're coming in cold, or you're stuck in the 150s and want to break into the 170s, you can't just slap together a weekend study plan and pray. You've got to have a strategy, a system, a calendar that works backwards from your test date and your application deadlines. Because here's what a lot of people forget. Law school admissions is rolling. That means applying early is better. Your chances of admission and scholarship money go up dramatically when you apply earlier in the cycle. So if you're thinking about taking the LSAT in October or November, your prep should have started probably yesterday. But don't panic. What matters isn't when you start. What matters is that you commit. You treat this like a job, not a side hustle. You don't dabble, you train. Because when you do, that 170 plus score becomes realistic. And that one number can change everything. The schools that admit you, the money they offer you, and the freedom you have to choose the path you actually want. And all of it starts with giving yourself enough time to succeed. Now, most people treat the LSAT like an annoying barrier, something to get through so they can move on to the real stuff. Essays, resumes, rec letters. But that's a huge mistake. Because if you play this right, the LSAT isn't just a test. It's your first real lever. Let me show you what I mean. A higher LSAT score doesn't just get you in. It gives you control over where you go, how much debt you take on, and whether you graduate with options or obligations. If you want to go to a top 14 law school, you're going to need the score. If you want a 6-figure scholarship so you're not crushed by debt, you're going to need the score. And if you want to walk into 1L knowing you earned your seat and you belong there, you're going to need the score. This is the part of the game that most applicants don't understand. The LSAT gives you leverage where nothing else can. If admissions sees that 172, suddenly your softs are going to look stronger. Your essay hits harder, and your application moves from maybe to must admit. Because now you're not just another well-meaning poli-sci major. You are a clear win for their class profile, a bar passage signal, a rankings boost, a safe bet, and they will fight harder to admit you and fund you. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to score high enough that you change how they see you. That's what leverage means. It's the ability to tilt the whole system in your favor by moving just one piece. And in this process, that piece is your LSAT score. So let's stop pretending law school admissions is a mystery. It's not. Of course, there is some subjectivity. Every school will have its own flavor. But at the end of the day, behind closed doors, the conversation is not, is this applicant passionate about justice? And it's a lot more like, will this person help or hurt our metrics? It's not about being cynical here. It's just incentives. They're not trying to build an interesting class. They are protecting their school's rankings, bar passage rates, employment numbers, and funding. So when they look at your application, they're asking, will this person finish all 3 years? Will they pass the bar? Will they get hired? Will they boost our medians? And will they make us look good? If the answer is yes, you're in. If the answer is no, you are a risk and they ding you. And here's where most applicants get it wrong. They try to impress with more extracurriculars, more leadership titles, more heartfelt essays about wanting to make a difference. That's all fine, but it doesn't answer the question admissions is really asking. Can we trust this person to succeed? And the fastest, clearest way to say yes is your LSAT score. A 173 doesn't need extra justification. It is the justification. It says, I can think clearly under pressure. I'm already functioning at a law school level. I'll probably pass the bar, and I'll probably get hired. That's what makes them feel safe. That's what makes you stand out. Because they're not just looking for good stories. They're looking for good bets. So when you walk in with a strong LSAT, you're not begging to be chosen. You're proving that choosing you is the smartest move they can make. Now, you've probably heard all the talk that AI is coming for lawyers. And yeah, parts of that are true. AI can summarize legal documents, draft simple contracts, flag inconsistencies in non-disclosure agreements, and even pass the bar exam. It's real and it's only getting better. But here's what AI can't do, and this is where it matters. AI can't read a judge's tone and know when to pivot your argument. It can't mediate a deal between two sides who don't trust each other. It can't tell a panicked client, you're going to be okay, and mean it. It doesn't understand nuance or ethics or strategy. Because law, real law, is about more than rules and statutes. It's about judgment. It's about knowing when to push and when to hold back, when to speak and when to stay silent, when to follow precedent and when to argue for change. That's not something you can automate. It's something you train for. And the truth is, we're heading into a world where the human lawyer becomes even more valuable, not less. Because AI is going to handle the easy stuff. But what's left is the hard calls, the high-stakes work, the thinking, advising, and persuading, which means the lawyers who win in this new landscape will be the ones who think clearly, communicate precisely, and solve problems no machine can touch. And the first step toward proving you can do that is the LSAT, because the LSAT doesn't care whether you can memorize facts. It tests whether you can think critically, spot flaws, weigh evidence, and make sense of ambiguity. That's what modern law requires. And that's why this test, frustrating as it may be, isn't going away. In fact, it may be one of the last real filters between just another degree and a real legal career. Let's pause for a second. I'm not saying the legal world is collapsing or don't go to law school unless you have a 180, but I am saying to see the game clearly before you sit down to play. Law school can be incredible. It can open doors most people will never even walk through. Federal clerkships, public interest leadership, big law salaries, policy work, entrepreneurship, academia. But those doors don't open just because you got into law school. They open because you prepared strategically. You understood how the system works. You understood what law schools want. And you understood the difference between getting in and getting ahead. And you used the one tool that gives you real control before you even step foot on campus, your LSAT score. Because when you take this test seriously, not just as a hoop, but as a lever, you stop playing defense. You start making decisions from a position of strength, choosing the school, negotiating for scholarships, and entering 1L confident. That's what clarity feels like. It's not about having all the answers, but it's about finally seeing the board and knowing where to move next. So take a breath, forget the rankings, forget Reddit, forget the pressure to just make the right choice. Just ask yourself honestly, why law? Not the answer that sounds good in a personal statement, not the one that checks the right boxes, but the real reason you are pursuing law. Maybe it started with a class, a professor who pushed you harder than anyone else ever had, a case you couldn't stop thinking about. Maybe it was personal, a moment where you watched something unfair happen, something that made you say, that can't be okay. Maybe it's because people come to you when things get complicated, when they need someone who can think clearly, explain carefully, and tell the truth without flinching. Or maybe it's simpler. Maybe you just want a career that means something. Work that's not fluff. Work that carries weight. You don't need to justify it to anybody. You just need to be honest with yourself about what's driving you. Because if you're here, still watching this, still thinking, then that reason matters, even if it's not fully formed yet. And that reason is the beginning of your next chapter. And if that chapter includes law school, then you owe it to yourself to enter on your terms, not as a backup plan, not as a panic move, but as a strategic investment in your thinking, your future, and your ability to move through the world with power and purpose. And the first move is mastering the LSAT. Not because you have to, but because it gives you the leverage to shape the rest of the game, because the system's not waiting, and neither should you.